Presented from the Aishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of Counterculture presented by Counterman Magazine. Well, Arnold Motor Supply's legacy stretches back almost 100 years and is shaped by the vision of its founder and the dedication of its people. To give us an inside look at that journey and his book about it, we welcome back CEO Eric Johnson. Thanks again for joining us, Eric.
Thank you again. It's a great pleasure to talk about Mr. Arnold.
The book is titled, You Build a Business with People. How did the idea for this book first come about?
Well, I guess I should say that I never set out to write a book. The origin of it was at the time, and I don't know, this is probably not true anymore, but I think 13 years ago is when I wrote this. One of the big things to get your website noticed on the internet was you're supposed to have a presence on Wikipedia. And so we thought, well, let's write a Wikipedia article about the company. And so I thought it would take about an hour. We'd do a little research, learn a couple interesting things, and post an article. In the process of that, I found out about a couple of ladies one who had gone to work for the company in the 50s, and the other who had gone to work for the company in the 30s, who were still living, were local. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I'll go talk to them. And both the conversations I had just exploded into so much interesting content. It was obvious that this was so far beyond just a Wikipedia article. And so from there, I spent 9 months digging into all of this stuff and another 3 months of writing, and ended up with a book.
So looking through all of that history, what was the research process like as you dug into Mr. Arnold's life in the company's early years? Was there anything that surprised you along the way?
It really was interesting. It was so the research process obviously began with the conversations with the longtime employees. So Florence Rush was one of the ladies I mentioned. She was the first employee, worked for the company. I think she started in 1931. And when I sat down with her, I think was 102 years old at the time, and just a wonderful lady, and had such good insight and great recollections about what Mr. Arnold was like, what the business was like, what, the decisions that they were making. And so that was the primary thing, was those conversations. Also, somewhere along the way, someone in the company had been very proactive about creating an archive of documents. So we had a lot of letters, meeting, like booklets they used to print for annual meetings, just a giant archive of documents, which I just thoroughly enjoyed. I got to know the people at our local historical society and museum. They had several things that I learned about, and then started pouring through old newspaper archives, and I kind of got sucked into this, that it was, again, not something I ever imagined that I would have neither the time nor the patience to do. But it really was a fascinating thing. And what struck me the most, you asked if I was surprised. I think one thing that really struck me was how much information was available. For a company that's 100 years old, I didn't think we would find much at all, but there was so much available. It really did surprise me. And the other thing that surprised me was what a unique individual Mr. Arnold must have been to be as forward thinking and insightful as he was. I really took away, it was surprising to me.
Eric, we talked about this on the previous episode. Mr. Arnold had to build this business through the Depression and World War II. What qualities about Mr. Arnold do you think were most critical to his success during that time?
I'm glad you asked that question, because, I spent those 9 months researching, and most of the research ultimately ended up with Mr. Arnold at the middle of it. And during all of that research, there were really 4, I'd call them threads, that you just kept picking up over and over and over again, that when I got done and started writing the book, I really wanted to document. So those 4 things were vision, people, character, and attitude. He was truly a visionary. And I would say he's a visionary in 2 ways. One, he could see an opportunity that really hadn't materialized yet. He was ahead of his time with, the automotive, especially out in rural America where we obviously are. There weren't a lot of vehicles yet in the 20s. And in fact, there wasn't even a paved road to get to Spencer in a vehicle. So, he was seeing what was coming. And then he also had the vision and the ability to articulate that vision about superior service. He said that meeting the needs of customers through superior service was what our company was all about, and it still is. So he had that vision, but then he also had the way that he worked with people. And I'm not so much thinking about customers as his own employees. He really valued people, and they could feel that he did. And I think this was unusual in the 1920s. He just over communicated with them. Today corporate culture seems to be, you want to ramp up communication. He was doing this in the 20s and 30s where he would sit down with everybody and just talk through, here's what's going on. And people really appreciated that. The third thing that stood out was his character. Interview after interview, comment after comment, everyone had such a high degree of trust in him. They were willing to take his word for it because he always backed up what he said. They were willing to trust him with their money because we were a partnership. So people were investing in the company because they trusted his vision, but they also trusted his ethics that he was going to do the right thing by them. And then the fourth one was his attitude. People talked about that his attitude was tangible, which, you don't, and I guess you think about it, that's true. Attitude is somewhat tangible, but he really set the tone for when you walk into his store, he wanted you to feel his attitude. He wanted you to feel that, we are upbeat, we're positive. And he did that through, he talks about he wanted to have well-lit showrooms. Again, ahead of his time in the 30s, 40s, he just had this attitude, this can-do spirit. And, that's what got him through things like the Depression and the war. So, yeah, those four things really stood out during that research.
Eric, there's a lot that today's entrepreneurs can probably learn from Mr. Arnold's career and his story building his business. Are there any particular lessons that you think today's business leaders can learn from his experience?
Yes, there's probably dozens, but one really stands out to me. I read this during my research in a 1959 article published in a magazine called Jobber Journal, which I suspect was the counterculture of 1959. Right. From what I can tell, they would interview things just like this. And one thing that he talked about was starting the business, that he apparently had this idea around 1924 that this would be profitable, that he could get into the auto parts business. And for 3 years, basically, in his words, and I have the quote right here, he was a bookkeeper during this time. And he said, I went right on keeping books. I was afraid to let go. And, to me, that probably is the biggest lesson. Was he had a great idea. He didn't just leap into it. He 3 years was maybe a long time to think about it, right. But he ultimately did come to that conclusion that he was ready to let go. He also mentions that he had a very supportive wife in it. There's a lot more to going into something like this than just, hey, I'm going to take a chance. And to me, that was one of the biggest lessons that we can apply is the way when he saw an opportunity, he was, even though he had a good job and a comfortable income, he was willing to take a risk and take a step.
Eric, there seems to be, at least to me, a real lack of literature about the history of the automotive aftermarket. How important was it? Was it important to you to help fill that gap with this book?
I have to admit, at the time I was writing it, I didn't notice that, didn't think about that. At the time I was writing it, my audience that they say when you're writing something, you're supposed to picture an audience in your mind. And so the audience I was picturing in my mind was not the aftermarket per se. And part of that, I think, was because I was new to the aftermarket when I first wrote it. Now I've since rewritten a revised version and put that out within the last year. But when I originally wrote the book, I was really more thinking about entrepreneurs. I was thinking about, probably Mr. Arnold was in his 20s when he kind of took this leap. He was approaching 30. I was thinking about the guy today, the young person that is in that same boat, maybe looking for some inspiration, some story that will help them know what to do, how to do it, and be inspired to do it. So that's really what I was thinking. Now, after I wrote it and then was starting to go through the publishing and all of the rest of the process, that's when I kind of recognized, this probably has more value within the industry, because it's in some ways, there are so many other companies whose stories mirror this one. I mean, it's not like he was doing this in a vacuum. It was all over the nation. Other people were going through the same journey. And so I really do think that it does fill a gap, a historical gap. For one thing, where did we come from? How did we get here? And I'm super glad I wrote it when I did, because most all of the original source people that I've spoken to, with one exception, they've all passed away since the time I wrote it. And so, if I hadn't sat down and talked to them, that would be lost. And so, yeah, it does fill a gap that I think is valuable.
That book titled You Build a Business with People. Eric Johnson, CEO of Arnold Motor Supply. We appreciate your time and the perspective you've given us on both the company's history and its future.
Greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Thank you.
And that's all for today's episode of Counterculture. You can see our other Counterman videos by visiting our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time.